In today's lecture, we will be focusing on the concept of market failure. Now, to understand the concept of market failure better, first let's look at when market do not fail. To understand the concept, we'll first focus on the perfectly competitive market, and perfectly competitive market is often known as the most efficient market. Now, what does this most efficient market means? Efficiency means that it maximizes welfare or surplus, and if you remember, welfare surplus measured as consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Now, to understand this concept better, if you remember it, in a perfectly competitive market and in a standard demand and supply diagram, if you have a price and quantity, and if this is your demand and this is your supply, this point wherever demand and supply meets, that's your perfectly competitive outcome. And at this point, this is your consumer surplus, and this bottom triangle is your producer surplus, and total surplus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus is maximized under perfectly competitive market. Now question arises, why perfectly competitive market is most efficient? And there are a couple of reasons for this. Competitive market is most efficient because of one, productive efficiency. It means that it is a situation in which good or service is produced at the lowest cost possible. Now, it's not surprising that when the market is very competitive, firms try to be very efficient, which means the firms will get rid of all productive inefficiencies and try to produce the goods at the lowest cost possible. Otherwise, they will be wiped out of the production process because their prices would be higher and they will not be able to sell if they have productive inefficiencies. So productive efficiency is assured under the perfectly competitive market. Now, second important issue is the allocative efficiency. It means that in a perfectly competitive market, production represents the consumer preferences. It means that if you're buying something, you are maximizing your own personal benefit as a consumer, and also the firms are trying to maximize your consumer preferences or consumer benefit. So that's allocative efficiency in a nutshell. So these two actually makes the perfectly competitive market the most efficient form of market, and that's why this is our benchmark. So we will always try to compare any market situation with a perfectly competitive market outcome. Now question arises, what is a market failure? What does it mean? So market failure is a situation in which the market fails to produce the efficient or maximum welfare or surplus level of output. That means it is producing at a level which is not maximizing total surplus. And if you remember, total surplus is again consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Now there can be multiple reasons for market failure. One reason is monopoly power, which can lead to market failure, and that I'll show in future lecture. Second reason for market failure is externality. Externality can be positive or negative, which essentially means that your actions have unintended and uncompensated effects on somebody else. For example, when you smoke, it's not only affecting you, it's also affecting people standing next to you. But you are not compensating that other person who is suffering because of your smoking. So this is an externality, and markets can fail if there are external costs or benefits. Third reason for market failure is public goods or free rider problem. It is a situation where you cannot charge people for the usage of particular service. For example, the public parks The problem with public parks is that it needs to be paid for and it requires money to build it. But at the same time, you cannot exclude people from attending the park. As a result, question arises how you pay for a good when you cannot exclude people, but also everybody has a reason to free ride on this because they know that they cannot be excluded, so they have no reason to pay for a service. So we'll talk about this also again in future lectures. And final reason for market failure could be incomplete information or asymmetric information, and it can lead to moral hazards and adverse selections. Now we have done some parts of this when we were doing the forms, and we saw how there are differences in information between the manager and the worker, and that's why manager try to have authority over the workers, and we'll extend those concepts beyond a firm and try to understand how incomplete or asymmetric information can lead to market failure.